Hi, everybody. My name's Sam,
And my name's Ben.
and
And
we're
we're the
the
Book Fair
Book Fair
Boys.
Boys.
What are you doing with your
I was
tempo?
just doing, no, you were stretching it out.
The Book Fair Boy. How are you
I
gonna
thought
say
you
it?
were, oh, I was going to say the Book Fair
Okay,
Boys, but it sounded like you were saying the Book Fair Boys.
we gotta get our cadence. We have to get our cadence
Okay,
right.
how are we going to say it? What's the
I
plan?
don't know. You lead the way. You tell me how it's being said.
Okay, we're going to do
The
the
Book
Book
Fair
Fair
Boys.
Boys.
Yeah, we'll just keep the Z going. Right? Book Fair
Yeah, Book Fair
Boys.
Boys with a nice a murder hornet buzz, if
Nice.
you
I like
will.
it.
All right, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name's Sam,
And my name's Ben.
and we're
The
the
Book
Book
Fair
Fair
Boys.
Boys. Great. Do you think we got it?
It's wonderful, I'm sure.
Probably not.
I
We're
really
using
hope
it.
yeah, I really hope that we find a way to use it. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, we're gonna use one of those. I'll send you a sample.
You should just it should be let's like lean into the awkward. I feel like that should be our slogan. Our secondary slogan is lean into the awkward.
What's our first slogan?
I don't know. Greatness
He's
is
got a
only
gun.
he's got a
Oh,
gun. Oh God, he's got a gun.
What were you gonna say?
I
Greatness
don't know
is
something.
what?
I don't know. I was gonna pull something out of my ass that had the word greatness in it. I don't know.
Greatness is
The bread in the oven.
oh, yeah, greatness is the bread in the oven.
It's the we are scholastic.
That sounds vaguely dirty, doesn't it?
It
Oh, he's got that scholastic disorder. Um,
I thought you were gonna say he's got that scholastic cock.
he's got one scholastic cock.
That's good. Yeah, it does sound vaguely
I
dirty. It's not a good word. It also sounds like it might have something to do with geology, like it's
yeah, but something really boring.
yeah, it's like a scholastic fundumbulum.
Fantobulum. Yeah. Oh my god, that is like the one that you try to memorize so hard and then it's not on the test and you're like, God damn
Now
it,
this
Mr.
now these words are
Smithson.
just in my head forever.
Yeah, forever. And then you think that until like 5 years later and you're like, oh, I don't remember any of these.
Yeah.
Anyway, my name is Sam.
And my name's Ben.
Welcome to the fourth episode of the Book Fair Boys. We're joined today by a nice tangerine white claw.
And I've got a 60-minute IPA. I'm showing the
Wow.
Sam in the camera. I've also
Ooh,
got
it's pretty, everybody.
a Bon and Vive spiked seltzer, but it's like
Oh,
4% alcohol. It's pear and elderflower. It's not very
whoa.
good. That's why we got the 60-minute IPA.
Oh no.
We're not gonna let it go to waste, but it's very peary.
Oh
It's like
no. Have you tried other flavors? Like, are other flavors better of that brand?
yeah, the cranberry's good. I don't know what you're thinking when you call something pear flavored, but I mean just imagine a pear
I
flavor.
don't know what kind of asshole you think you are.
Just saying. It's like there's a reason that you don't just go and buy pear juice, right? Maybe somebody
Okay,
buys
yeah,
pear
yeah, no,
juice.
that's
I'm
fair.
sorry to those pear juice people who are buying pear juice, but it's very pear flavored. The elderflower, I don't actually even know if there's elderflower in this. I think they might have just said we can't call it pear, so
Nobody will buy it. No, that's fair. You need something to cut it down, right? So like canned pears, you put sugar in there or something. My family was big on canned
yeah.
pears when I was growing up. We ate a lot of
And
them.
pears are good, but I don't know. I mean, like, I don't know. I don't know why I'm hating on pears. Pears are fine, but
No, they're a lot. Like,
there's something about the liquid form of the taste. It's like I'm imagining essence of pear, and it's just not. Yeah, it's not something you want to put in your cake. Your essence of
would
pear
you?
cake.
That's something. That's going to be our new tagline. Something you want to put in your cake. Do you feel like it's this like the difference between like pickles and pickle juice? Like you would eat a bunch of pickles,
Oh,
but You
That's a
wouldn't drink pickle
really good
juice.
analogy. Yeah, that's probably what it is. There's just something about I don't know. Yeah, the flavor's more concentrated. I don't know. I don't know what it is. This isn't my area of expertise. I just know what I like and what I don't like, and this is not particularly good.
Well, there goes our
Bon and Vive. Oh, Bon and Vive.
yeah, there goes our Bon Vive endorsement. Thanks a lot.
Tisk tisk. There's a
Yeah.
mermaid on it though. She's purty. That was a long time. Maybe we should just reintroduce our stuff.
Big tangent. Yeah, listen, everybody. My name is still Sam,
My name's still Ben.
and today we're going to be talking about the fourth book in the Goosebumps saga, the Goosebumpiverse.
The Goosebumpiverse.
Yeah, the GEU, the Goosebumps Extended Universe. This is Say Cheese and Die. I don't know if I ever read this one.
Really? I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure in the last one you were like, when I was bitching and moaning about Monster Blood, you were like, "Well, you're gonna like Say Cheese and Die." I think that I don't remember what you said. You've listened to your recording of yourself probably, but
I yeah, when I go to sleep, I nestle in next to myself. um, no, I remembered I had used the TV show adaptation of Say Cheese and Die for my practicum, so I had seen it recently.
it was a very serious
I
practicum.
Yeah, it was a bunch of 9 and 10-year-olds, and I was like, the character flaw should be something that saves the world at the end of the day. Like, how can you use your character flaw to defeat the villain? What is something that gives them a symbiotic
Oh,
relationship?
this is really good.
And yeah, they came up with a lot of really clever things. Like, well, my hero is an avocado and the villain's a knife, and I was like, okay, cool. Or like, my hero's a plug and my villain's an outlet. Shit like that.
We got a
They were
lot.
fun, but what were you gonna say?
Just no, a lot of plugging in metaphors you got going on with this group.
Yeah, yeah, they were a hoot. Yeah, they could not hold their attention span for very long. So every so often we would watch a little episode of something.
Yeah. I loved this book.
Okay, thank you for getting me out of the hole I was rabbit holing into.
I loved this book so much. It was, if we're thinking of Monster Blood as the trunk novel that sat in R.L. Stein's briefcase of spooky tales for years and years, and nobody wanted to publish it, this is definitely the I've got some time because my trunk novel's been published. I'm going to really work on making this the good one.
Hmm.
At least I
Yeah.
liked it. What did you think, Sam? How'd you like Say
No,
Cheese and
I
Die?
I thought it was great. I really agree. I think he had such a comeback after Monster Blood in my eyes. It makes me excited again to read more Goosebumps. And the more I think about it, the more I'm like, you know what? That's sort of the Goosebumps I remember, where there were like alternate dimensions and shit, and like there were places that you were going to. So in Monster Blood, nothing was happening and no one was going anywhere. So I was like, this is really disappointing. But I remember like Horrorland was like another universe. Like you would
Hmm.
go into the Horrorland universe, or like you would get stuck in an alternate dimension where your parents were never born or something. That's kind of the stuff that I remember. Ben, what is Say Cheese and Die
Oh
about?
my God. This is an easy one to summarize, except for all of the exposition dump at the end, which we'll get into later. So it's basically the Goonies, or no, it's not even the Goonies. It's basically, oh my God, I'm blanking on my proper nouns. That's on
Stranger
Netflix.
Things?
Yes, thank you. It's basically
Yeah.
Stranger Things. If Stranger Things was about the kids, instead of falling into the upside down and finding, a magical girl that can move things with her mind, they find a camera that can kind of take your soul or maybe make you disappear. A camera with ambiguous powers that are all negative. You take a picture and something bad happens because it either
Yeah.
sees the future or it makes the bad thing happen. All right, let's back up. They're in this spooky building with this guy named
Yeah.
Spidey, who is the most effective villain up to this point in terms of creep factor. I think he's like
Yeah.
total unknown. We don't know where he come from. So he's like a creepy homeless guy that lives in this abandoned home. They sneak into this abandoned home and they find Greg finds this camera, and he takes a picture with it, and something bad happens. Like this kid falls, one of his friends, Michael, falls down the stairs. And then they find the picture later on and they're like, whoa, you caught him falling down the stairs, but he had taken it before. So Greg, he's a little slow on the uptake, right? He has to do this a few times. He takes a picture of the car. His dad gets a new car, and then it turns out the car's totaled, and in the picture, and then he's like freaked out about all this stuff with the car. Takes a picture of his brother. He looks at it, and there's a picture of his brother with like a terrified face on there instead of smiling. And so there's like all these like pictures that he's taking, and so you work through the story bit by bit as you're working towards the next picture and seeing how it becomes how the bad thing happens, and then ultimately we get to the end where they have to solve
Yeah.
the problem. So it's kind of like this, if we're thinking about it from a structure perspective, it's kind of like this series of like connect the dots where you always know where it's going, and you know they're not going to be able to stop themselves from getting there. So the question is, how bad is it when they get there? Like when they take a picture of the kid and he's like laying on the ground with his neck at an odd angle in the picture, and they're like, oh, that's fucked up. You're like, how bad is it going to be when he gets there? Because he's going to get there, and then what's the next thing that they're getting to after that?
Yeah, it makes me think of movies like Final Destination, or that's you get the bit pretty quickly where it's like, how exactly is this image going to come true? Is it going to come true at all? Can I change it? Like, how deterministic is this camera? Stuff like that, right? So like if the picture is of you looking scared on a baseball field, then when the characters go to a baseball field, you're like, oh shit,
They're going to be scared by something.
something spooky's gonna come at you.
Yeah, but so the thing is it's like better than Final Destination and better than those movies. Not better than, but like it solves the problem that those movies naturally set for themselves, because you have a kid. Like you have this kid who's like, nobody's going to believe if he tells them the secret, right? And he knows that, and he's constantly messing with that in his brain. So like rather than going through the process of like having the plot have to explain like why you don't call the cops or why you don't tell your parents or what happens if you were to call the cops, just all those things happen, and the fact that he's a kid is like crucial to the fact that like this mystery is going to be something they're going to have to unravel versus looking to an authority figure to solve it for them. So
Yeah.
like a lot of times in those like plots where there's a weird MacGuffin object that like does bad things, the question is always, well, why not just like get rid of it or go do X or go do Y or go do Z? And they pretty successfully address that with them being kids that are way in over their heads. So there's this escalation of like pictures that are taken, and then it reaches the ultimate escalation, which is where we step into this sort of unreal realm. So far, everything's been like maybe it sees the future, but then he takes a picture of his friend Sherry because she's like super into this camera for whatever reason, and she's like
Yeah.
insisting that he take a
This
picture of her. Give me your take on Sherry. Sherry's like super into
I
this.
just wanted to say, yeah, the kids in this story do not seem to have any real sense of like picture taking. Like, they desire pictures an inordinate amount.
They
They
really
like
are super
are
excited about getting their picture taken, all of them.
yeah. It like constantly they're just like, can I take my picture next to this tree? And then they like lean against the tree, and a couple times R.L. Stein writes like, oh yeah, and they struck a sophisticated pose, and you're like, what? So I guess that's like maybe the bit too, is that it's like kids trying to like be adult, and like, here's pictures of us having memories like adults do, and we're sophisticated like adults, but they do it constantly. And Greg like constantly has to fend them off, being like, this
Everybody
camera
wants this
is
camera,
evil.
man. Everybody
Everybody
wants
wants it.
it. And
Yeah.
like, but I think they even explain that in the sense that you start this off with these kids being so bored and not knowing what they're going to do. They're talking about, we can't even watch a movie because mom's making us go outside. It's a group of four kids. So we've gotten away from the brother sister combo,
Mm.
which is nice. We got these four kids that are chilling. And then for Sherry, who kind of senses this camera's kind of weird, she's like inviting Greg over, and she's like, yeah, my mom won't even let us like have my birthday party in my house, so bring your camera because there's literally nothing else to do. We're just chilling in the woods. At least there's like a weird logic of it being the cool new toy in this town of 12-year-olds that just have nothing to do but walk around the same streets every day, and then
Yeah,
suddenly
and
one of
the
them
I
has a
mean,
camera.
yeah, the opening line is even like, well, we live in a town called Pitt's Landing, and Pitt's Landing is the pits because there's nothing to do. So that's fair. They established that right from the get go, that this town is just so boring that having your picture taken is an excitement.
And
Um,
Dad getting the new station wagon. He's like,
Dad gets a new
let's go for a drive, family. I mean, as if it's the 1950s and not the 1980s. Like, and the
yeah.
son's like, yeah, let's get in Dad's cool new station wagon. Like,
Yeah, and then so Greg takes a picture of the new station wagon and it's all ruined, and then Dad's like, "Let's go for a drive in the station wagon," and Greg's like, "Oh, actually, I'm good," because he knows that they might crash, and his parents are like, "But Greg, you've been looking forward to this new station wagon for weeks."
and Terry, his older brother, is like, yeah, Greg, coming in the station wagon, man, come on.
Yeah, Terry also has one of my well, I can't say one of my favorite lines because one of my favorite Goosebumps lines so far is still that you mean the dad that we thought was our dad was a plant.
Solid.
Yeah, but in the adaptation of Say Cheese and Die, Terry bursts into Greg's room and Greg's like, "Don't you know how to knock?" And Terry goes, "Nah, I haven't taken that class yet."
This is not a grade A cut up, material
Yeah.
too. This is definitely like, again, I think R.L. Stine, he just pushed his trunk novel out there. He's like, good, I don't need to worry about writing another book I don't have a deadline until like 1993. So we're good. We got a few months
Yeah.
here. And I mean, he really took his time. You got a character named Bird who's just always cracking wise, everything. And it's not like he's like
Yeah.
delivering grade A material,
No,
but
it's
this is
mostly bird
it's
humor.
mostly bird humor. It's very punny, but you're like, all right, this is a 12-year-old that I believe. I've know this 12-year-old. I've seen this 12-year-old. He thinks he's
Yeah.
super funny. He has his cohort of people around him that are mildly amused at his antics and clownishness. And so
Well,
he
but
just
that's
does
also
it.
where yeah, he just does it all the time. But that's also where you lose me because the image is like he'll do some bullshit joke, and then R.L. Stine will describe a large group of kids laughing at his joke, and you're like, how?
Because they're 12
Like,
years old. They don't know any better.
I was talk
You were
about
very
sophisticated
savvy.
poses. I was very sophisticated for 12. Um,
At 12, you were like, oh, but that's not Louis C.K. material right there.
yeah,
Wait, who's a good
my
comedian?
friends
Who's our comedian now?
now. Well, when I was like 13, I was really into Patton Oswalt.
Oh,
For
you
those that
were
remember that,
sophisticated.
I was. My friends would make fart jokes, and I'd be like, "Well, Dostoevsky says."
Yeah, so Bird's like leading his own comedy club of really mediocre jokes. But all of these characters, at the very least, you can see that he's like, so we're still in the plot kind of, but I think it's worth talking about these characters because all of them feel kind of defined. Like this is very clearly everybody's got a kind of thing. Like Shari really likes the camera. She's also the girl one, so she's the girl one of the group.
Right.
Terry's kind of like Greg, but much more confident. You've got like his dad who's goofy. You've got his mom. You got lots of characters. You got Spidey. You've got Bird, where his gimmick is the jokes. You got these two bullies that are definitely
Yeah.
like a more evolved version of what were those the Beamer twins? What were those kids called in the
Oh, the
last one?
Bamer twins.
The Bamer
Yeah, and I
twins.
was always like, you could cut these bullies, but then the final gotcha is that they find the camera at the very end.
It's
So at the very end,
just
like,
enough, and they're in it just
yeah,
enough. All right, we've got this camera, and I'm just like lollygagging with my plot explanation. So, Sam, what happens with this camera after they've established what it does? And Sherry actually, oh, we didn't even say Sherry. What happens? Sherry disappears. They take a
yeah.
picture of
So
Sherry, and she just disappears. She's just gone.
And this is the same shit that I was saying about Welcome to Dead House, where like you have to go so the mental gymnastics that you have to do in order to rationalize something irrational that is happening to you. So like Greg points the camera at Sherry leaning against a tree, takes a picture, and it's just the tree. And she's like, "Oh, Greg, you fucked up. I'm not even in the frame." And you're like, "What? He pointed it at you. This is the same shot." But you're more willing to believe that Greg somehow messed up than like this is a magic camera, which you've seen evidence of already.
Yeah.
And then she ends up vanishing, and then 2 days later he's so upset that his friend Shuri is missing, and there's some real horror here. Like her parents are upset.
He comes home to a
It's at
trash
some,
to his trashed
yeah.
bedroom that Spidey has been in, Spidey has
Yeah.
trashed his bedroom looking for this camera, and
Right.
he doesn't really know, but his comes home totally alone after
Mm-hmm.
speaking with the police, who are wondering what happened with Sherry, and he tries to tell them, "I have this camera," and the police pat him on the shoulder and they're like, "Poor kid, he's lost his marbles with grief," and then he
Yeah.
goes to his house and his room's trashed.
Yeah.
Like we've got some real escalation of like isolation here.
Yeah. And then he's like, we have to get rid of the camera because Spidey knows where I live. Let's do it first thing tomorrow. And I was like, tomorrow? He knows where you live tonight.
But his friends are
Like,
like, "Nah, man, I'm good." Michael and Bert are just like,
yeah.
"Sorry about that. I'm sorry that he has your number, knows that you have the camera. See ya.
Yeah.
I'm not going back in that house." Like,
Sorry. Yeah, so there is some real danger here and some real horror. I mean, the a missing child is just like, whew. Greg is so distraught. He tears up the picture that he took of just the tree,
yep.
the one that like quote unquote made Shuri disappear. And when he tears it up, Shuri reappears.
She doesn't
So
know
they
what happened.
realize,
Yeah.
yeah, and she has no memory. First thing she knew, she was leaning against the tree. Second thing she knew, she was in a parking lot somewhere, I think she says.
Yeah.
She was like,
Yeah.
yeah, she's like, I woke up in a Denny's. Did you know that Denny's has really good, like, it's an ad for Denny's
And
page.
2 days are just gone.
Yeah, so 2 days are just
That's
gone.
what happens when you go into
Um,
a Denny's, man. 2 days just
oh,
disappear.
but let me tell you, the products at Denny's, I go in for what is it, a Grand
I
Slam?
don't
And I
know.
am
What is it called? Something over my hammy?
something over my hammy?
Yeah, it
Is
was
it just a
always
plate
like
of ham?
it was based on that song, Something Over Miami. So it's like sun over my hammy, and
Oh.
it's just all pork products. Or maybe that's Pancake House. I don't know. I get them confused.
I think pork gives me indigestion anyway, so I'm not fully on board with it.
Oh my
I
god.
anyway, so what they kind of figure out is that like the camera, I guess, like abducted Sherry. Like she went into the camera somehow. They have some understanding that like these are intimately related. So like, okay, Greg and Cherie, let's go into the house. Let's get rid of the camera. We'll put it right back where we found it. And then this creepy homeless guy, Spidey, won't bother us anymore and everything will be okay.
Totally. And so, as long as we're talking about Spidey, also got to give a shout out to the creepiest imagery of Goosebumps villains so far too. We've got like the weird stuff. We got the weird body horror with the green blood of the dad, the plant blood, and
Yeah.
like the leaves growing out of his hair, and that's kind of weird. But like, there's a moment where the next picture after, and this is coming because again, it's connect the dots. He's taken a picture of himself, and the picture is him and Sherry sitting in the bleachers at the baseball field looking really terrified. And
Mm-hmm.
so they go to the baseball field and you're like, oh shit, this is going to be, they're going to be really terrified. And Spidey
This is
appears
gonna be bad. Yeah.
and Spidey starts chasing them. And they describe him as like moving quickly on his long, spindly legs, his arms outreached at them. And they're just
Yeah, like
pounding
a
the
black
pavement
spider.
like a black spider. And then like he does this interesting thing where I was really into R.L. Stein's prose this time. He does this interesting thing where when terrifying things happen, he just diverts to color. And so like when Greg's
Oh
dad is in
yeah.
the hospital, everything's green because he's just seeing like
Yeah.
green hallways and green. It's just blurs of green. And then when Spidey's chasing
Yeah.
them, it's just blurs of gray, gray on gray. His gray sneakers hitting the gray pavement as he's running as fast as he can. He
No, it's
gets
very true.
dabbles in the surreal. It's not like
Hmm.
concrete. Like the imagery a lot of times feels like we're thinking of like painting. It feels like Jackson Pollock stuff. Like he's just sprinkling imagery with real quick little paint splatters sometimes, and it's effective.
Yeah, he has moments like that in the last couple books. I mean, the moment about the sparrows that I was talking
Oh
about
yeah,
and stay
yeah,
out of the basement,
yep.
and then like in Monster Blood when Evan's mom leaves,
I
he
can't say
smells her
anything good.
perfume.
I'm not saying anything good about Monster Blood. I refuse.
Okay, no, listen. Um, when mom leaves, Evan can smell her perfume, and then all of a sudden he just smells mothballs again.
Mm,
It's something like the mothballs,
I do remember you
and then
talking
all he
about
smelled
that.
were mothballs. Did
Yeah.
I talk about that?
Yeah,
All
you
right.
you talked about that as being like one of the good things of the book when we were talking about good things. And
Oh, all right.
I don't think I conceded it even then, but it is nice. That's a nice thing. I just
Thanks,
hate
man.
guys, I really hate Monster Blood.
I just loathed that book. It is true. That book did feel like okay, and I also kind of have this one,
Yeah.
right? Anyway, So they bring the camera back into the house, and of course Spidey comes there, and they're trapped. Then he explains
Everything.
the plot,
He
right?
explains everything. I'm hoping that as R.L. Stein continues to evolve, and I don't know if this is going to happen, but I hope when we move away from some of this, we've got a character with secret knowledge that's going to deliver the witchy mythology at the end of every
Yeah,
book.
yeah has been a theme. Welcome to Dead House made it work somehow because they were just like, we don't know how we became dead. One day there was just a yellow chemical cloud over the town, and the next thing we knew, we were dead people. And you're like, okay, that's legit.
Yeah.
Then it, Monster Blood sort of does that. It was 30 years ago. And you're like, oh no.
When I invited Sarah Beth, who is the cat, into my house,
Yeah,
and she
yeah,
she enchanted me. Yeah, there's like this whole witchy mythology that's explained. This one is the equivalent of if the engineer who designed the yellow smoke that took all the people from Dead House
mm,
sat down and explained what happened to them and why they're dead now to a bunch of 12-year-olds, because he basically
yeah,
does that. He's like, I invented this camera, but I did it with a partner who was really good at the dark arts and cursed the camera, so now it's evil, and
yeah,
it's supposed to just tell the future, but now it tells the evil future, and he says it steals your soul. So it's like there's lots of things. I mean, clearly he was going for camera is creepy and does creepy things, and like going for this, oh yeah, there's ancient cultures that like think cameras steal your soul. So what happens if that was real? And then just decided maybe I'll just do both, but I'm going to have someone explain that. I mean, so it's
yeah.
awkward. At least for me, that was the awkward point of the book.
No,
Like,
because it's way more interesting to have something super suburban or mundane somehow imbued with the supernatural,
yeah,
right? Like if you, so I read like one of the sequels to this one. I read maybe a couple of them because there's like four. I definitely read Say Cheese and Die four. But my memory is that there's summary mundane events like a barbecue, it's pretty benign, and then there's just a touch of evil, which is way more interesting to me than like here's a full explanation. There's something that displaces that evil from the actual reality. Then, if you're like, oh, this comes from this other place, but if the evil is somehow just like in the scene with you, like here's a normal looking Polaroid camera and a normal looking barbecue.
totally. There's like degrees of explanation too. Like, there's the whole mythology of the Indian burial ground in American horror, where
Mm-hmm.
you take your thing and you build it on top of this sacred place, and now there's something spooky that's happening that's, because of that. And then there's like the explanation where it's like there was this woman who was murdered and her child died or something, and so now she steals all the children. So it's like there's levels of like specificity of explanation, and this one goes all the way. If you're going for like vague object that we don't understand, that is just evil, but we've learned how it works, so like some sort of evil totem. If you go from that to like an engineer slowly explaining his like origin mythology for this object, it's interesting. I guess what it is it provides an unnecessary explanation that demystifies an object that you don't feel like you need explained because you've learned how it works, and that's what's most important about it. It's not important that
Right.
you have the backstory of it. It's just important that it's bad and you know how it's bad now, and so you've got to like put it back in its sacred place so that it stops being bad.
Yeah. So anyway, Spidey's in the basement with them, and he explains all this shit.
And then
They wrestle
they
and
wrestle
they manage to take a picture of him
on accident,
and on accident as they're struggling over the camera.
and he fucking dies.
He fucking dies. He fucking collapses in a dead corpse heap
And he
on
is
the
just dead. It's not
floor.
like he's dead and they're in another
Yeah.
room. They're like, is he dead? And they're like, yeah, this guy is dead. And they look at it and they look at the picture and they see that the picture is a picture of him dead because they have the
Hmm.
picture for some reason, and there he's dead.
And there he is dead. Whereas in the show, same as with Stay Out of the Basement, you can't show death in a
No.
kids show, right? So he gets sucked into the camera and then he's banging against the lens of the camera, asking to be
Let me
let
out of
out.
here.
Let me out of here! Just like it. Do you ever watch Twin Peaks?
Oh my
Um,
god.
when she gets
Yes.
trapped in the doorknob and she's like, ooh, trying to get out of the doorknob, which they fully explain never.
Yeah, Twin Peaks is definitely leaning heavy in the opposite direction of everything we just talked about when it comes to over-explaining your universe and
Yeah, Twin
mythology.
Peaks will spend an entire episode letting you watch. Like, did you watch The Return too, where he's like
No, not
gets
yet.
so Dale Cooper, the bit of his plot is that he accidentally gets zapped into like an
Yeah.
alternate body, and so you'll spend an entire episode just watching his alternate body dick around while you're like, wait, so is Josie still in the doorknob, or like it's never addressed. I mean, it's brilliant, and it's amazing. It's awe-inspiring. It's excellent television. I love it. I also hate it because it's so frustrating. None of that is here nor there.
So this guy's bang.
So
He's like Josie's banging on the camera lens. He's like, "Let me out of this."
yeah,
At least in the show. So in the book,
yeah.
he's fucking dead. Um,
He's fucking dead, and then they leave the camera there, and then the bullies from earlier discover the camera, and they're like, "Hey, take a picture of me," and then
take a picture of each other.
they take a picture and they wait for it to develop, which is such a good ending line. That's how everybody ends a short story, right? And then they waited.
It's
Like,
it's like waiting for Godot, man. It's
yeah,
absurdist theater. No, it's
yeah.
really it's a good use again of these characters, which are throwaway characters, as opposed to the book that shall not be named. I'm gonna call it from now on the book that shall not be named, but I'm also going to call it Monster Blood immediately afterwards to make sure that everybody
I'm
knows
referring, of course, to.
how much I fucking hate Monster Blood. But it
Oh
like
man.
unlike Monster Blood, where you just have these bullies because you need to have a threat because your book doesn't have a monster that's threatening. These
Hmm.
bullies are like in for half a second, kind of scary, but then they're not really a threat, and then they're gone. And then they show up at the end just to like steal the camera. So we've seeded the bullies because we needed the bullies. Because I almost thought in the beginning, why do we have bullies in this chapter? Like we don't need these bullies.
Yeah, I was like, cut the bullies.
But then you get to the end, and it's like, okay, we just had the bullies. We
Oh,
had to establish the bullies so that we could
yeah,
understand not only is this dark power back out in the world, but it's with the bullies. And
yeah. You gotta set up that sequel,
yeah,
and the adaptation, by and large, follows the same structure, except
yeah.
they cut Michael.
For some reason, why did they cut Michael? Did they just not
I
have a
don't know.
budget for another kid actor?
Yeah, I don't know.
Like it's the most surreal thing. I mean, I don't know. All of these adaptations make funny choices, but it's basically the same thing except they cut Michael, and then at the end, the Beamer boys go into the place and get the camera, which looks like a mixture between a Cthulhu monster and a space object.
Oh my
Um,
God. Yeah,
the prop
that
design on this camera is so absurd.
that camera is the most insane thing I've ever seen.
Like,
It is like,
no wonder these like bullies want this thing. This thing looks like a rocket ship or alien spaceship for like really tiny aliens. It's
yeah, it's nuts. It's like someone spray painted a toaster purple and then put handles on it, and the you click the end of the handle to take the picture,
but
and it boops and whirs.
it's all super smooth too. Like
Yeah.
like it's organic looking in a really
Hmm.
weird and uncomfortable way. It looks like at least it's plasticky looking in terms of texture, but it's organic looking in terms of design. It looks like it's a living object, like if somebody pulled a squid up out of the water and it only had two
So true.
tentacles.
Yeah. Yeah. Really, really nuts. Also, the star of the adaptation, the guy who plays Greg,
Yeah. What'd you
did you
learn?
see who it was?
No, I don't I did not notice who it was. Who is this kid?
It's Ryan Gosling.
No, you're kidding me.
Yeah, it's Ryan Gosling. He plays Greg. He was 16.
Greg Gosling. Oh my god. Goosebumps. I'm looking this up. I'm fact checking you.
Also, one of the police
Oh my god,
officers.
it's Ryan Gosling.
It's Ryan Gosling.
I thought this was going to happen. I don't know why I was convinced this was going to happen eventually, but I thought we're going to come across somebody who's not just been doing TV their entire life eventually in one of these episodes.
100%. And one of the police officers who comes to talk to Greg, and they're like, which also is a ridiculous scene where they're like, one of your friends is missing, kidnapped, gone.
What do you know about it?
Like,
Like they're really intense.
punk.
They're
Yeah, they're
yeah,
intense.
much more intense in the adaptation than in the book.
Yeah, one of those police officers is Ronnie from Schitt's Creek. Did you ever watch Schitt's Creek?
Oh, you and my friend Eva and also my parents have been telling me I really need to watch Schitt's Creek.
Oh, it's so good. You would really like it. And then the only other things that I had to say about the adaptation in my notes here, Terry runs up and he's like, Greg, there's been an accident. I've seen better acting in defensive driving videos. Um,
Well,
I
even
mean,
even
like,
Ryan Gosling in this one, he's leading heavy on the 90s dude bro archetype. Like
yeah, it's so
Greg is
true.
very dude bro,
Very dude, bro.
which is fine.
Um,
But it doesn't
it's an
it's
aesthetic.
not a stretch to his acting skills. When he emotes, it feels like, oh yeah, this is a way a dude bro emotes. Not like I'm watching an actual human being experience emotions. You know what I mean?
Are you talking about Ryan
Yeah,
Gosling in
yeah.
general or just in
Oh no,
this?
in this specifically.
Oh,
I don't
okay.
know. I mean, what else is he in besides like the what's the letter one that is based on that novel that
Oh,
the
The
Notebook?
Notebook?
Yeah,
Yeah, he's good
he's
in The
good. Yeah.
Notebook. I like The
What else is he
Notebook.
in?
Drive.
Oh
He
my
was in
God.
Drive.
Well, that's also one where if he, I mean, no, he's great in Drive. He's great because he does not have to have emotion. I mean, I'm not commenting on Ryan Gosling's range. I don't know what his range is like. I'm just saying that like if that character had emotions, it would be to the detriment of that film. And so he's just either angry
Yeah.
or stoic. The mystery is what you want with that character. You don't want to see him get messy and sad.
He's also great in Crazy Stupid
I
Love.
don't know that one.
Such a delightful film. All right. Anyway, so it makes me think too of like in The Shining, the book, right? Have you read the book,
I
The
have not.
Shining?
No.
Okay, so in the book, there's a decent amount of explanation that the hotel itself is a haunted place, and the hotel and the ghosts in the hotel are trying to take Danny so that they can use Danny's psychic
Yeah.
power to spread the evil influence of the ghosts in the hotel outside of just the hotel. Like he can broadcast The Shining all the way to Scatman Crothers in Florida. So they can use him to spread their influence. That's never explained in the
No.
movie. So in the movie, you just get this like mishmash of film where everyone's like, "Oh, what's happening?" And you're like, "This is
Yeah.
happening." Um, but Stanley Kubrick acts like it's some other bullshit. So I felt the same way in this, where there is an interpretation of the adaptation where you're like, oh, now he's in the camera. Like, what does that mean? Well, the camera eats souls. They say that in the book, and you're like, no, it's there's mystery to it. Like, we have to decipher the. No, an explanation exists. It's in the book. I felt the same way. Not that I
I'm
really
confused about your
have.
feelings. Are they good or bad?
I don't know. That's what I'm realizing.
Because you
So
sound
I don't
really
really have an
angry
argument.
about how Stanley Kubrick ruined The Shining.
He absolutely destroyed it. I don't know. I enjoy. I think this is how I feel. I enjoy The Shining in both iterations, both film and
But they're
novel.
fundamentally different.
They're
Yeah.
fundamentally different things. Like I don't love either one. Like I wouldn't reread The Shining probably, and I like wouldn't say that The Shining is one of my favorite horror films or favorite films in general. So I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. But I just feel that like I have a hard time getting sucked into the decades of mystery of people trying to like decipher everything going on in the Kubrickian
Mm,
Shining. So when people start to be like, well, there are all these interpretations, I'm like, are there though? Because the source material is pretty
there we
clear.
go. So it's not you're arguing with
So
Stephen
yeah,
Kubrick. You're arguing with people that want to say what he means. Who are you
I
arguing with?
guess,
Are you
yeah.
arguing?
My dad. No, I don't know.
And that's The Shining,
um,
people. I'm arguing with my dad.
Yeah. I don't know. I that just made me that was a thought that came to my mind as I was watching the adaptation of this where I was like, "Oh, but you never explained that."
Yeah, and I think to the benefit of the show, like I actually really want to give them props for this adaptation. So it's the season closer for season one, and I think it's a good season closer.
Oh, I didn't know
Yeah, it's
that.
episode 13. It's
Okay,
the final
nice.
one. It's solid. Solid little season closer. Good beginning, middle, and end. I didn't know that it was Ryan Gosling, but man, that Greg kid, he's just carrying it like a dude bro the whole time. And, I complain about them cutting Michael because it doesn't make sense to me, but there's a lot of just general fat trimming in this that is effective. Like, it gets to the major action beats of the book really quickly, doesn't overlinger. The book takes a long time playing this connect the dots where you have to see the picture and then dread the realization of the picture and then play with that tension in Greg's mind for a while. And the show's just like boom, boom, boom. Like, we're at the picture. Okay, now we're taking a car ride. Oh, that was scary. We're fine. Oh, wait, now we're seeing that the realization. There's like, it's very fast. And so at the end, we do not waste a chapter where Spidey explains how he invented a camera, but there were dark arts that corrupted it, and it was supposed to tell the future. You just have this crazy guy in the basement who's like, "This was supposed to make me a fortune," and then they take a picture
Yeah,
of him, and he disappears into the camera, and he's banging on the lens. And then the
yeah,
bullies show up, and they click the camera, and Spidey appears outside of the camera behind them, like a creepy ghoul
yeah.
rising up, which also no explanation, and I'm totally into.
I've interpreted that as when you take another picture, you release the soul that was just
Yeah.
trapped. But again, what I think I need is several decades of investigative work and two different
You,
documentaries in order to really understand the
I mean, was it
intricacies
on an
of.
Indian burial ground? Is he his own father? Was he there in
Yeah,
1920 helping build the camera that eventually captured him in the 80s? What's that picture on the wall?
this is what I'm talking about, man. This is
What's with the
like,
bar? Who is that guy? Is that him? Is that someone else? What
right?
what's with the red rum? Who are those twins? Are they elsewhere?
Who gives a fuck? I all of that shit is explained in the book, and watching the movie you're just like, "Oh yeah, and that's so and so." And then you're watching it with your friend who didn't read the book and he's like, "Well, it's so mysterious." And you're like, "Is it though?"
I will say, having not read the book, I think that anybody who gets into the question of like how do we explain this falls into the trap of doing exactly they're like midichlorian making. They're like sitting there trying to figure out
Right.
the like mythology behind something that is like a fundamental unexplainable mystery that basically gets down to dad wants to kill me, which is the real horror of this thing. The horror of this thing
Right.
is dad goes crazy and wants to kill me,
Right.
and that's enough. And all of the other stuff is just like window dressing that gets you there.
It's very true, and maybe that's what frustrates me about it because I know that it's a trap. And so all these people who enter these discussions like there's an answer. The same way that like I have a lot of friends who are like will watch the trailer for the latest Marvel movie and then be like, "Oh, well, I think they're doing this storyline because of blah blah blah," and they're trying to figure it out. And I'm like, "Dude, in 6 months you're gonna know. Like, why are you spending so much energy on trying to interpret all of these cool fan theories, none of which will be true? Like, were so stoked on all these different fan theories for like Infinity War, and none of them were
But
true.
Sam,
Um,
if you get it right, imagine the social cred between you
I
and your
know,
one
right?
friend that you told. And if you called it on the
Gosh,
internet, then nobody's going to remember. But you can say you called it on the internet, and your group of people will probably still not believe you, but they'll be like, yeah, that's cool. That's nice.
I don't know what I'm frustrated about. I guess I'm just frustrated.
Guys,
um, what I do.
we're 40
Oh,
days into
go ahead.
quarantine.
Please help. Yeah, I was just talking to my mom. So I live in Brooklyn, but I had this plan to visit my mom for a weekend. She lives upstate, and that was mid-March. And then the closer we got to the weekend, she was like, "Why don't you pack a few more clothes than you need for the weekend and just stay a little longer?" And I was like, "Yeah, things in Brooklyn aren't looking super hot, so maybe that's a good idea." And then by like that Tuesday, they were like, "We have so many bodies, we don't know what to do with all of them." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm good plan, mom. I'm staying up here." And that
uh,
was mid-March.
Now it's May
Yeah,
3rd.
it is May 3rd. Listen, what was I
I
gonna
don't know,
say?
man. We've really gone off the rails on this one, haven't we?
Oh, I'm so angry. Oh, that's what it was. So a detail that I do love is that Mike Flanagan was doing the movie adaptation of Doctor Sleep, the sequel to The
Yes.
Shining, and he's done a lot of really great movies. He did Oculus. He did the
Mm.
adaptation of Gerald's Game. He's done some
Oh, he
really
did
awesome
Gerald's
work.
Game. That's a really
Yeah.
solid movie.
Isn't it? And Oculus, I love. Um, so in Doctor Sleep, they return to the Overlook Hotel. So Mike Flanagan was like going through these old notes of Kubrick's to like figure out certain things about the hotel, and he said that the maps of the hotel are designed to like not make sense. Like the
Hmm.
blueprints don't really make sense, which Kubrick did to throw off, just to create a sense of
Yeah.
unease. And so those shots where like Danny is tricycling through the hotel, and you think that the point of those shots is to show you where things are, to like teach you the layout of the place, don't necessarily match
Yeah.
up. I don't know. I just thought that
Impossible
was interesting.
geography. They're like they give you a sense
Yeah,
of stability that gets undermined later.
yeah. Anyway, speaking of a sense of stability that gets undermined, sort of the last big thing that I was thinking about is the question of determinism
Mm.
and fate, and how narratives like Say Cheese and Die mess with that idea, right? Because that's sort of the question that Greg brings up again and again, is like, is this meant to happen, or is the camera forcing it to happen? Which is the same question that you have in films like Final Destination, where you're like, was death always going to have come for me at this particular time, or did I make this happen by doing this thing?
So I think it's funny. For me, this narrative comes down pretty hard on the strong determinism stand things because, like, whether or not you take the picture is irrelevant. Once the picture is taken, there's no avoiding getting you to the spot where the event is going to happen. Like, and there's like this whole
Right.
moment where Greg is in the car going on the family car ride because that's what you got to do in your new station wagon, right? And he's
So
freaking
stoked.
out, and like there's a truck that dad almost hits, and you're like, whoa, was that it? And what, 3 chapters later, that it wasn't it, that the car was in fact always going to be totaled. So I think this comes down pretty hard on the hard determinism route. I do think that there's implications that the camera is also causing these things to happen, but I think that whether or not it's causing it, it's like if you point a negative consequences gun at an object, right? And then you get a clear sense of what the negative consequences are going to be. Once you've gotten that picture, there's nothing you can do to stop it from happening in the logic of this narrative. It's interesting. I wonder if that to me is not super horrific. The idea that like you just can't change things. I don't know. What's your read? Is that a horrific thing?
That
Yeah,
fate.
that fate is just there and that there's nothing you can do to stop it from happening.
It really depends. I mean, it depends on the event itself. I think that there's a really human urge to have like shifting view of fate. If fate determines something really good, I feel like there's a strong urge to say, okay, well, that's fate. It's meant to happen. I meant to find the person I'm going to marry. I meant to publish the next great American novel, whatever. But then if you're going to be in a car accident or your dad is going to die, the first response is
I need
no,
to stop that from
right?
happening. Yeah.
Yeah, how can I stop that? So the view of fate that so many people have seems so subjective and like based on positive or negative outcomes.
Yeah,
I
there
don't
is
know.
an underlying tickling horror at the assumption that one does not. I mean, and again, this isn't something that's explicit to the story because the story is always very visceral. It's not like we have a chance to have Greg sit back and like think about the implications of the camera. He wonders about what it's doing, but it's always a how question. It's never a why question. The why question underneath is sort of interesting subtextual horror and the question of like whether or not it's possible that all of these things, as you mentioned before, were going to happen anyway, or whether or not it even matters that the camera was there, or even if the camera is some sort of like weird negative energy object, if that even matters, because it's just the bad things are going to happen once you point the camera at them and press the button, no matter what.
Yeah, right. So like, does it even matter that the camera's there because you're gonna be in a car accident anyway? And there is some like the dad is driving too fast. When he's in the hospital after the accident, his mom says like, "Oh, I told you you were driving too fast," you know. So there are other forces at play.
Yeah, it's funny because like over the last couple of years, determinism has come back into fashion and then faded again. We kind of go through these waves, I think, every once in a while, philosophically of determinism, where it kind of becomes the main way of thinking about like how decisions are made in behavioral psychology, and that was really hot in like the early 2000s, where everybody was realizing your brain has a lot more power over you than you think it does, and like these books
Mm,
like Thinking Fast and Slow, or like the Invisible Gorilla were coming out that were sort of talking about
right.
like how our minds play trick on us and how we to give us a sense that we're making choices. That was like really hot and was kind of a hot horror for a little bit in the philosophical world, but you have people who have come back from the background and like are trying to reassert either that doesn't matter, it doesn't matter whether or not determinism is real because it shouldn't affect the way that you behave in the world, or that like perhaps it's not actually real and like uh, there's cosmic goofiness happening or whatever. I guess what I'm getting at is like it's a very adult discomfort. It's a specific discomfort that I feel like mostly afflicts like I don't know, 20 somethings. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Like you reach a certain
Yeah.
point and it's, that old Dave Chappelle bit about like, in your teens you're like fuck my parents, fuck my mom and dad, fuck my grandparents. They can't tell me what to do. Fuck my school. And then, you're in your 20s and you're like fuck the government, fuck my boss. They can't tell me what to do. And then you're in your 30s and you're like I'm hungry. I want to get a sandwich. And that's like I think very fundamentally true that like there's just an energy shift.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, it feels like a horror that is adult, but also is of a certain time. Because at some point, I was talking with my friend about this the other day. He and I used to argue back and forth about determinism, and he was very anti. And I was talking with him about it recently, and he was like, "Yeah, I don't know, man. It doesn't matter, right? Like, like it's not going to change.
It
It's not
doesn't
going to change
matter.
the way I
Yeah.
behave in the universe, whether or not like I actually have choices. I'm just going to proceed as if I do." And I'm like, "Yeah, I guess that's true." You know?
Yeah, so I've been watching this show Devs that's made by Alex Garland, the guy who did Ex
Hmm.
Machina, and he wrote 28 Days
Yeah.
Later. And it's interesting. A lot of it treads familiar territory where it's like they create this computer that like has a predictive algorithm that is so powerful it can show you things that have happened hundreds of thousands of years ago
Hmm.
and can predict into the future as well. And so the kind of central question is this just a predictive algorithm? And if it's predictive, can you then change it? Or have things just like things will always shake out this way because the algorithm is so
Yeah.
precise? And so that's kind of the big question of the show. And at one point, Nick Offerman is in it.
Oh my
And at one
God.
point, Nick Offerman,
What?
yeah, at one point, Nick Offerman, he's like, I've watched us have this conversation many times and I'm sort of spoiling the show, I guess, but I didn't like it enough that I would be like, "You gotta watch it. Let's talk about it after you
Yeah.
watch it." But
It's kind of like
at one point,
the second
it's
Matrix,
what,
where it's like you got Colonel
yeah,
Sanders in the room and he's got all the different TVs talking about determinism.
exactly. If I had watched Devs before I watched things like Maniac or Matrix Reloaded, I would be like, "This is groundbreaking." It's not. Um, so and I think the idea of like multiple iterations of the Matrix and like all the different like screens of shit that you can say is more interesting to me than like it's an
Yeah.
algorithm. So I don't know. Anyway, so at one point Nick Offerman is like, I've watched us have this conversation many times. Every time I say the same thing. So now when I'm saying the things that I'm saying, it doesn't necessarily feel like I'm reciting lines that I know, but it feels like it just feels right to say these things in this moment. And the things that I want to say in this moment just happen to sync up with what I've seen already performed in this
Yeah.
moment. So that's sort of the question too. Like, would you always feel like this was the decision to make, even though you know that it's been predicted? If the spooky camera showed you eating a slice of cake, then would you still have the impulse to have a slice of cake, or has that impulse been
Well,
changed?
so, this is like getting into some pretty heavy stuff for Goosebumps here, Sam. But
I know,
but
right?
it is seated in the novel, or it's seated in the book at least in terms of the question of determinism. I want to say I haven't stayed up to date because I passed 30 a while ago. I haven't stayed up to date on the determinism research, but I'm fairly certain I remember reading some books that were about the effect of information. And I have a hard time believing that the effect of information being injected into a system would not change the way that system works, right?
Right.
And, this even goes back to like there was Daniel Dennett, who's, I don't know, he's an old man, but he's a philosopher of the mind, I guess you could say. He's like a lot of things, but like Daniel Dennett has this study that he always cites when he talks about determinism, where his big problem isn't that determinism might or might not be true. His problem was always that if determinism is true, it leads towards people being less morally good. And he would cite these studies where I don't know how valid these studies are. I don't know what their methodology was, but apparently there were enough where he felt confident in their findings that like if you tell people they don't have choices, more often than not they're going to make choices that are less pro-social and that are more selfish, which is
Oh gosh, that was that was
interesting.
the whole thing. That was
Yeah, and like it's interesting, and part of it is the injection of information into a data set, right? Like you're letting them make choices that are either pro-social or antisocial. You're letting these individuals do that. Like when you put that new information in the system, it changes the way that the individuals behave.
right. That was the story that I was working on that came out in the Macabre
Yeah, that was a good
Museum
one.
last in October. Right, I didn't know that that was a whole study. That it was like if you get a picture from the future of you winning a Pulitzer, you're like, great. Doesn't matter what I do because I win a Pulitzer. So you spend the next 30 years just sticking around waiting for your Pulitzer, and you're like, oh fuck, I never did that. I
I
never
probably
worked
should have
for it.
written something at some
Um,
point.
yeah, and then they knock on your door and they're like, "Here's your prop Pulitzer. Can you hold this? And we'll take a picture. We'll send it back to you." That's interesting. I mean, I didn't know that that was a whole thing.
Yeah.
Um, well,
It's like a really right field of study. I mean, at the end of the day, what's interesting is I'm 100% convinced that R.L. Stein did nothing when it came to like research into determinism or brain scans. I mean, this is 1993, so are brain scans even a thing? I don't know. But he has a really coherent time loop here where it
yeah,
follows rules that are in a very strict deterministic pattern. And, there's probably some sort of weird dark magic outside influence that's causing them. But like there's no place you can pick it apart.
yeah,
Like the picture happens and the bad thing's going to happen. And that allows for at the very least a very clear and interesting narrative framework because you're always working towards how is the next scary thing going to happen because I know what it is. I know that there's going to be a scared look on their faces or I know that Bird's going to get beamed or I know that Bird's going to be on the ground. I don't know what's going to happen and then he gets beamed with a baseball,
yeah,
right? So
right.
it's like a pretty smart way to do a story because as a reader you're like always looking forward. The text is determined, so you're always looking forward regardless of let's see like how is this going to play out. I don't think we're going to solve determinism though today, Sam. I'm sorry.
Damn it. Then I'm hanging up. No, but that's. I mean, you start getting into some reader response theory then too. If you're saying that the text is already determined, so whatever happens is just your interaction with it, versus like, do you make the text happen by
Oh
reading
my
it,
god.
right? And I remember, that was always my experience with shows like Game of Thrones, where like this character is going to be dead forever now. Like or who else would I have thought that of? I guess like certain characters in Harry Potter. Like there are certain characters in Harry Potter or Game of Thrones that are just dead forever
Yeah.
now. And if you had stopped reading or watching at a certain point, they would still be alive. But
God.
now you go back and you're like, oh, this person's dead now. I'm watching a ghost. Even though at this point in that universe, they are still alive. Right? I love reader response. I think it's super interesting.
Give this man a
Um,
PhD.
Give me a PhD. Ben, did you have any other thoughts on either the book or the adaptation that you wanted to share?
No, I'm really interested that it's Ryan Gosling. This is probably, I would say, I'm gonna get straight into rankings. I'm gonna say number one
Okay,
Goosebumps book so far. So two spooks, way to
right
the
on.
sky. In fact,
Sky High
we're giving
Spooks.
Sky High spooks. We're like even putting like toes up. We're having a good time with this one.
Wow, nice. Okay.
Really solid structure, good story, compelling, really competent adaptation. But I'm gonna say this is one of my less favorite adaptations, partly because it's well done. And for me,
Oh
the
no.
charm of these Goosebumps adaptations is just how silly they are. Like I can imagine
Yeah,
this would probably have been like kind of scary to me as a young kid.
yeah. Especially when he comes up behind them
When
at
he
the
comes,
end, just
whoa, he's
looming.
right there. He's Spidey. He's
Yeah.
he's creepy. He's not Dr. George or whatever the hell, Dr. Herbert, whatever the hell his name is in the book at that point. He's still just Spidey, which that was another mistake, R.L. Stein. Keep him
Oh,
Spidey. Don't give him a name.
yeah. Right.
They start
Right.
change like even the narrator voice starts referring to him as Dr. Herbert at that point. I'm like, what's going on here? Don't do this.
What's happening? Yeah.
Sorry, we're
Okay. So what's your
so
number
number
two
two.
then?
Oh, number two Goosebumps book is
Yeah.
book is gonna be Stay Out of the Basement, and then Dead House, and then Monster Blood is
Right on.
like holding the basement door down, like it's way down there.
It,
I've already set it down there, and like I'm preparing on to stack things on top of it.
yeah. The book that shall not be named.
Monster Blood.
Monster
What
Blood.
about you? So
I'd
go on ahead.
no, I'd agree with
Yeah.
that ranking. I want to hear more about your adaptation ranking
Um,
now. So Goosebumps is not number one. What
Number one
is?
is Monster Blood because
I'd
because
agree with
that is
that.
silly, funky fun. We got all sorts of like they are not playing around, but they are going 100%. They're like the script is silly. The script is self-aware. It
Yeah.
knows it's silly. The actors all know that it's silly, and they're all giving it their all.
Yeah, everybody's having fun
Yeah,
in Monster Blood in a way that you can tell nobody is in Stay Out of the
it's
Basement. Stay Out of the Basement looked like a bad time on set.
it did. Yeah, Dead House is probably my number two, and then this is probably my number three, with Stay Out of the
Yeah.
Basement being at the bottom. Although I did really like the Dad's a Plant stuff and the flower. I like the way
That's a
the flower
plant.
had like a chipmunk voice at the end. Like there were they had some
Oh,
funny
yeah.
choices still.
Some
They did
good
my girl
bits.
Lindsay bad though, man, or whatever. What was her name? What was the friend's name in Get Out of the Basement?
Oh,
Lindsay.
yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think it was Lindsay. Guys, leave a comment if it wasn't Lindsay.
Um,
Yeah, they
damn.
did her bad. She was a force. Last note
Yeah.
though, I'm interested to
Okay.
see how R.L. Stein continues to evolve his use of complex character relationships because we start off with a brother and a sister and a mom and a dad. Then we have a brother and a sister and a dad and a friend. And then we have Monster Blood, which is just all over the fucking place with like a weird aunt and like a cool kid and a shop owner and a dog and some bullies. And
Hmm.
they're just everybody's doing their thing. It's super messy. And then
Yeah.
we have this, and it's like four kids, and we got parents, and we got police officers, and we have lots of
Yeah.
relationships happening in a really
Complex.
fun and good, solid way. So I'm interested to see if the next one continues down this path of like evolving more relationships, like making the things more complex, more characters. Yeah.
Yeah, and sexier. I
Oh man, we
mean,
had crushes in
in
this one.
there were crushes in this one, and they like full on go into the woods at Shari's birthday party. They're like, well, we're gonna go in the woods and play truth or dare.
Yes, and
And they're like, well, there are so many more girls than boys. This is gonna be embarrassing. And then they don't talk about the details of the game. All of a sudden, they go to play the game, and the game's over. Like,
so embarrassing. They're gonna have,
so
and they
embarrassing.
even mentioned they're like, we're gonna have to kiss people. I think they said at one point. Like Greg's like,
Probably,
I
yeah.
think I'm pretty sure I remember that Greg was like, I'm gonna have to like the girls are gonna make us like kiss people.
Yeah, they're like, play spin the bottle, and the girls are giggling, and Greg's like,
Yeah,
oh.
it
Yeah,
was
poor 12 year
it
olds.
was yeah, it's true. We've gone from very clear friend relationships with like some outside forces. I'm sorry, very clear family relationships with some outside forces to this cute girl on a bike that's like really powerful who beats up bullies to now we just have bottles spinning, keys getting left in like fish bowls. Who knows what's happening.
Yeah, the kids are all having key parties.
Who knows
Oh
what happens when you
no.
go in the woods on a birthday party, man.
Oh no. Yeah, and the mom is even like, oh, I'm a terrible mom letting you all be alone together. And you're like, Mom, jeez.
Yeah, so we got some
Oh man.
gradual evolutions happening. We'll see what happens in the next. What is the next one, Sam?
Yeah. I was gonna say, Ben, the next one is called The Curse of the Mummy's
Oh my
Tomb.
God, this is
What?
a this is a classic according to Goosebumps TV. When every time I search for Goosebumps on Netflix, The Curse of the Mummy Tomb is one of the first ones that pops up. That one
Wow.
and
Okay, so
the
what do you?
and the creepy doll one.
Oh, Night of the Living
Yeah.
Dummy. Yeah, that's top. So what do you expect from The Curse of the Mummy's
I
Tomb,
I
Ben?
have no idea, man. After Monster Blood, I'm like not excited about a title that is not a complete phrase or sentence.
Well, Curse of
No,
the I guess that's not a
it's not
full
a full
sentence.
sentence. It's
Yeah.
not Stay Out of the Basement. It's not
Um,
Welcome to Dead House. It's not
it's
Say
not an
Cheese and Die.
invective. It's
Yeah,
like, yeah, that's true. Yeah. All right. Well,
but we'll
um,
see. What about
we'll
you?
see.
Do you know
Yeah.
anything about this?
I remember that there was a sequel and it was called like Return of the Mummy or something. The Mummy Returns. It might have been The Mummy Returns now that I think about it because I remember being frustrated. I was like, it's already the title of a movie starring Brendan Fraser. Um, and I remember reading The Mummy Returns. There was like a boy. I was a Cub Scout, and so there was like a Cub Scout bonding event, and I brought my copy of The Mummy Returns, and I read in one room while the Cub
Oh.
Scouts hung out in the other
You're
room.
like definitely into mid-development chunk of Goosebumps books. I feel like all the ones we've talked about so far, you've read the sequels or the
Yeah.
later versions of.
Yeah. Yeah. And looking through, so I've got this list in the beginning of my Goosebumps special edition, which has books 1, 2, and 4. I remember a lot of the later ones. Like One Day at Horrorland was number 16. That
Mm.
was a classic. Go Eat Worms was a favorite. That was number 21. I don't remember shit about that one, but I remember that I liked it. A Night in Terror Tower was one of my top favorites, and that was number 27. So, yeah, I remember a lot of the later ones. Goosebumps was great because you could read them just like if a bookstore had any Goosebumps book that you hadn't read, it didn't
Yeah.
matter. Whereas, like, you had to get Animorphs number 9 if you had just read number 8.
Serialized versus your
Like,
Scooby-Doo Monster of the Week nonsense.
yeah,
Which I said
yeah.
nonsense, but I like Monster of the Week formats.
Yeah, X Files. That was like if X Files was on and they were in some small town fighting a werewolf, you're like, great. But if they were exploring the mythology of the alien invaders and you were watching it out of order, you're like,
You're like, what is this? Sam, how
yeah,
are
I
we
don't know.
going to end this show? We've got to come up with an outro. I mean, are we just gonna like so so we originally planned on calling this the Babel Boys, and I think that you guys can see why that's the case. But like we need help. Let us know what we can do as an outro. I don't know. Do you have any ideas, Sam?
Yeah,
Do we just say that's it?
I was gonna. I mean, this time I was gonna yell, "He's got a gun!" and drop the
Oh,
microphone and like pretend to run
oh, I
away.
really ruined that bit for you. I'm sorry.
No, it's no. I just thought of it a second ago. It was like I woke up this morning and I'm like, tee hee. No, I don't know. We could just say that's
All
it.
right. So
You gonna say that's
that's
it?
it. We've got a yeah. I mean, do we even say we got another show for you next week? That's it.
So, so don't go anywhere.
That's it.
Goodbye.
All right, I'm gonna stop recording.